Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is ANN Profiles. Today, I'm here with Amy Whitsett, who is the Associate Director for the Institute of World Missions. I got that correct, right?
That's correct. Although I would say an associate because there's several of us.
Okay.
But yes.
All right. Fair.
You got it right.
I would probably call you friend
Yes.
because we've known each other for over half of my life.
Well, it's a good long time.
We don't need to talk about how many years how old I am. We're going to go with that. And at some point we'll talk about where our journeys converge. But you were raised in New England, correct? Where in New England is the northeast part of the United States.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about where you were raised.
So I was born and raised in Vermont, which is it depends on how you calculate what New England is. Some people will add New York in. You're welcome.
It's okay. I wouldn't probably have, even though I'm from New York. I wouldn't have counted.
But it's basically Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont form northern New England, and then you have Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts that form southern New England. So I was born, and together those are New England. So I was born and raised in Vermont, right on the border.
So you're born and raised in Vermont, and tell us a little bit about your parents.
My parents were both Adventist when I was born. My father is second generation, so his parents became Adventist a few years before my father was born, so he was raised Adventist. My mother, on the other hand, became Adventist when she was 19. And I don't know the story, to be honest with you. I know she's told me, but it just didn't stick.
You know, I've actually said this to a few other people. You need to remember that story. You need to get that story. Because what I find, and one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, I find that this is going to be great for our children someday. I think that oftentimes our stories are getting lost.
Yes.
And for our families and our children to understand how God has led us is so important for the next generation to understand the faithfulness of God.
Absolutely.
So we know that she became an Adventist at 19.
She did.
And we'll figure that one out later. So your parents get married.
Yep.
And they have you. And I believe you have a sister,
I have a sister, Caroline.
Oh, I even remembered her name. I'm really proud of myself here.
And a younger brother, Steve.
Okay. So you grow up in Vermont. Now, Vermont is not a mecca for Adventism. I mean, it's like the churches are pretty far apart. And most of the churches are pretty small churches. I've been to a few churches in Vermont. I don't think I ever saw more than like 30, 40 people in them.
I think our church was one of the largest actually across the border in New Hampshire. And we had probably 50 people, maybe up to 70 people attending on a Sabbath. And now, of course it's smaller now, but.
Now, did you have an Adventist school that was attached to the church?
We did. It was a separate building, but yes, it was a little church school, 2-room school. And they had 3 teachers just before I started grade school. And then by the time I started, I think it was just the year before, they downgraded to just 2 teachers. So first through fourth through 8th. And then the 8th grade teacher, or 4th through 8th grade teacher, was able to teach a couple of the classes for 9th grade. So when I graduated from 8th grade, I stayed for a 9th grade year and did half of my courses through Greg's and half through, he was able to teach me.
So I actually went to one of these same, maybe is a New England thing here. Although we just said that New York wasn't really New England.
Well,
but
I'll claim you.
Thank you. So I went to one of these. It's a very different experience than like our kids both went to a school near here at the GC, which has like 400 kids in it, you know, and people who go to a public school, it's like when you tell them, it's like, there was 20 kids in my whole school, like grades 1 through 8. It's like, what?
There were 2 of us that graduated from 8th grade together.
It's like we had to argue over who became the class president. We just decided to both be. What were those elementary school years like for you?
I really, really enjoyed them. I had a really great childhood. We lived in the country. neighbors weren't really close enough. Neighbors with kids weren't close enough to get together and play. So my best friends were my classmates, my cousins who lived in the area, kids at church. It was church and home and community was all the same people. And I remember Pathfinders was a big thing. We did a lot of honors, but the elementary school teacher, the lower grade teacher, it was a husband and wife. The wife was the lower grade teacher, and she had all kinds of materials for different honors. And so when we finished our classwork, she'd say, well, you can help somebody else in the classroom if they needed help, or you can work on an honor. And so I remember one year I got something like 35 honors at the end of the school year because
So I'm not sure if that means you didn't help people. What was your favorite Pathfinder honor that you ever did? I've never asked this question. I love this. What was your, do you know?
I don't know. I loved the nature ones. I love nature. And so the majority of my honors are nature honors. I don't know. Sign language is coming to mind.
Okay.
I remember going to, there's a big camporee, regional camporee called, now I forgot. What a big camporee.
It was a big camporee.
It was a big camporee.
But not
for
international.
New England. No, it wasn't international.
All 500 people.
Yeah, right. Exactly. 10 clubs or whatever. But they offered the course or the honor there, and learning the alphabet, and just, it fascinated me. And I ended up taking one class in college. It was an elective that I needed to do. And yeah, I still use sign language now and then, but.
Okay,
yeah.
so you graduated from 8th grade, but you kind of stay home for your 9th grade year.
Right.
Griggs University is our, like, the Adventist Church's, like, kind of official homeschool kind of curriculum.
Right.
For parents who can't quite do it on their own. It's accredited, and it kind of walks you through step by step what you need to know. You end up using this curriculum much later in life to do stuff. We'll get to that here. Where do you go? Because obviously you said you just did this through 9th grade. So at some point you go, I'm going to guess, because we are in New England and I understand that, you must have gone to a boarding school.
Yes.
Know which boarding school did you go to?
But it wasn't a boarding school at the time. It was a day school. So there were 4 academies that I could choose from. There was Pine Tree Academy in Maine. That was probably a 4-hour drive from home. It was quite a ways. Union Springs Academy, which was even further. But there were other members who were sending their kids, so we could have gotten rides there. And then South Lancaster Academy, which was the academy school for Southern New England Conference. But there was no boarding there.
And that was near what was Atlantic Union College.
Right, exactly. It was right pretty much on the campus. Or maybe it was adjoining properties. But then the 4th option, which I went to, was Greater Boston Academy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I actually was going to guess South Lancaster Academy, but it was Greater Boston.
GBA, okay. Greater Boston Academy. And we had church members who had family who were faculty. He was a Spanish teacher. The wife was registrar or something. And so they invited me to stay with them. And it grew from my sophomore year. There were 2 of us living with them. To my junior year, they actually rented a house on the campus of the school. We were on the campus of an Adventist hospital. They rented a house on campus and turned it into what they called a mini dorm. So there were 6 of us girls living there. And then the next year there were 8 or something. And it just kept growing. Never had an official dormitory, but they were all mini dorms that they had. I think they still have dorms. I'm not sure.
Is GBA still?
GBA is still open.
Okay.
It's moved campuses.
Okay.
But yeah, it's still there.
So you went to Greater Boston Academy. What was one of your favorite memories from the academy years?
Every Wednesday, we had an outreach time. Every Wednesday afternoon, we had to do some type of community service. It was either going to a homeless shelter, not a shelter, but a food bank and helping at the food bank, or going to help in the hospital, or all kinds of things. One of the things was puppets. We could join a puppet group. And that's what I did. And I loved it. It was so much fun.
I did not know you did puppets.
Yes.
And I kind of love this new side of you.
No, it was fun because I was very, very shy. Extremely shy. And having a puppet on my hand, I could be in front of people because the focus wasn't on me. The focus was on what was on my hand. And we had a whole lot of fun doing puppets. We had one CD, or I guess it was a cassette tape at that time, of these parody songs. You know, they'd take popular songs and turn them into Christian songs. And just had a whole lot of fun with it, going to nursing homes. We also had a anti-drug kind of a thing program that we did. We go to elementary schools and do that. It was a lot of fun. It was neat to see it just bring so much joy to people's lives.
So you're in academy, you're going to have to go off to college, and you went to school to be a nurse, correct? Did you always know you wanted to be a nurse?
No.
So when did you discover nursing is my thing?
I don't know. I'll be honest. So when I was really, really little, I think even before elementary school, I felt deep in my heart that God was calling me to be a missionary, a foreign missionary, like Eric B. Hare or any of these stories that we read, right?
Reading them.
Exactly. And I just felt like that was what I was supposed to do. And I knew I was supposed to be a missionary on the Amazon in Africa.
The Amazon in Africa?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a really special place. I have not heard about the Amazon in Africa, but I'm glad.
I still haven't either. I haven't found it.
You haven't been a missionary there yet, though?
Not yet.
Okay.
Still looking. But when I discovered that the Amazon was not in Africa, I refused to believe the map for quite a while until I got to the point where I said, well, I kind of have to accept that the map is right. And then I was really confused. Honestly, it really, really shook me. Where am I supposed to go? I know I'm supposed to be a missionary, but I don't know where. Am I supposed to be learning Swahili or Spanish? There's a little bit of a difference between the two, right? But the other thing that I knew was that I was supposed to be a medical missionary. I wanted to be a medical doctor.
What made you think this?
I don't know, except maybe it was the stories.
So you must have been a reader, or at least had people reading to you. I remember growing up in because there were these small Adventist elementary schools, they would actually have like these story times where they would read us like Eric B. Hare or Swift Arrow, Spotted Boy and the Comanches,
all of those good
Nile
ones.
and the White Crocodile. Wow, sorry.
Fire
that was
on the Mountain.
Okay, now I feel like we just meandered right there. But there were a lot of really incredible mission stories that seemed to be during our time.
Right.
We were reading a lot of those kind of things.
Well, we didn't have, in our home, we had a TV, but because we were living in the mountains, we only got one channel. So we didn't watch TV. And Friday nights, I remember we would all lay in my mom and dad's bed, and they would take turns reading to us until one of them fell asleep and then the other drifted off. And then we're like, all right, I guess we got to go to bed. But we read and read and read a lot. So yeah, I felt that I needed to be a medical doctor, wanted to be a medical doctor. And I carried this all the way through elementary school. And I remember at the end of elementary school talking to my mom and saying, so high school is kind of like a holding pattern until you figure out what you want to do for life, right? And she's like, yeah, kind of. I said, okay, so that I can skip high school and go straight to college because I know what I'm supposed to be. And she's like, well,
that's not exactly.
It doesn't work that way. And so in my mind, I said, well, fine, then I'll do nursing because I'm supposed to be in the mission field and I didn't want to wait. So I thought, well, if I become a nurse, I can still do medical stuff, but I'll get to the mission field sooner than if I have to spend 4 years of college and then 4 to 8 years of medical school. I mean, that was just, I was out of time. I had no time for school. And so I did nursing, determined that I was going to be a missionary. I didn't know how to go.
And where did you go to school to be a not a missionary.
To be a nurse.
To be a nurse. Where did you go and get your nursing degree?
At Atlantic Union College.
Okay. So Atlantic Union College was a college in South Lancaster, Massachusetts. Yeah. So that northeast part of the United States. Right. I know that you met my sister and brother-in-law there. And you met someone else there who I think you think is pretty special.
Yes. So your sister, also Amy.
Yes. Two Amy's.
Yes. She had colportered during the summer.
Can you explain really quickly, what is colportering?
Colportering is where you take Adventist or Christian materials door to door. and you sell it door to door. So we were doing, or she had done mega books, which are magazine-sized books that you sell for $12 or $15 a piece. And it's a fundraiser for school scholarships, but it also gets Adventist books into the homes.
So it's kind of like it's a ministry missionary kind of outreach thing that also helps students.
Exactly.
Okay. So my sister had done this
for the summer, and we were on the same hall in the dorm together, and she kept saying, Amy, you got to do it. And I was like, Amy, I'm not going to do it. Amy, you got to do it. Amy, I'm not going to do it. Finally, I was like, you got to stop talking to me about this. I'm not going to do it. Remember, I was shy. I was like, I can't do that. I can't go to door to door and sell books to people I don't know. That's way too far out of my comfort zone. And I was looking for a job, and this was one of the job options on campus. And it came down to this was really my only option. And I had become a nurse's aide in high school. So I thought, well, I would like to work as a nurse's aide. I could make better money. But my parents wanted me to do a campus job. And this was colportering, canvassing was one of the campus jobs. And I just kept hearing over and over in my head, Amy, you never know until you try. And it was my mom and dad's voices, right? So I figured, okay, well, I'll give it a try. I'll try it for a couple months, prove to everybody, including mom and dad and Amy, that I can't do this. And then I'll be able to become a nurse's aide.
You failed at that, by the way.
I did. I failed at that. So yes, there was a tall, dark, and handsome guy who was the leader of the program. And yeah, long story short, we fell in love and got married. And
tall, dark, and handsome's name is?
Greg.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, Greg was working doing the colporter work. And when he graduated from college, he became the director of mega books for the Atlantic Union. And there was kind of a partnership between Atlantic Union and Columbia Union. So Columbia is like Maryland, Virginia.
It's where we are now.
Yes.
It's where the headquarters of the General Conference is.
Right. So we did a lot of traveling back and forth. The books came from Review and Herald Publishing Association, which is in Hagerstown, just 45 minutes or an hour from here. So we did a lot of traveling back and forth. And I discovered, going back to college, my first year, I discovered that actually I was really good at selling books. I don't know why.
Were you, Amy?
Because I didn't like meeting new people, but I was selling a lot. And they called me the cookbook queen because we had cookbooks that we would sell, healthy cooking. And then there were certain questions that you asked. And as a conversation would progress, you'd discover whether somebody had a spiritual interest or not. And, there was a whole canvas that we learned. And I was a cookbook queen. I would sell 10 or 15 copies of the cookbook each evening in the middle of winter, during the school year in New England, which was unheard of. But then over Christmas, something happened and I have no idea what it was. I'll find out in heaven. But something in my heart changed and I realized what I was doing was mission work. I was being a missionary in my home in the United States and I was making a difference in people's lives. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll stay here in Canvas. I'll stay here in colporter, not a problem. I'm ministering to people's needs. I'm being a missionary. I'm good. So my husband was hired to direct the Atlantic Union.
Now you're married at this.
We got married between my sophomore and junior year in college. Okay. He had just graduated. He was a couple years ahead of me. So my junior year, he's working full time. Don't get married between your sophomore and junior years. Because you don't finish your senior year. My problem was between my junior and senior year. And I had to figure that one out much later in life and finish it up. I was able to finish my junior year. And after that, I was done. I figured I'd had enough nursing and I was able to get my nursing license. Still able to become an RN. So I became an RN. I actually took my boards in the middle of New York City when we were picking up students coming from the Caribbean to colporter during the summer. So my husband they'd usually arrive on night flights and they'd stay all day and then we'd take them to the bus in the evening. And so I'd spend all day in the hotel room studying. And then one morning on the way to the bus or to the airport, how'd that work? Somehow. Anyway.
On the way to something,
he dropped me off at a testing place and I got my license, took the test. So anyway, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, you got your nursing license.
I got my nursing license, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it because I was now canvassing. I was colportering. And then a couple years later, Thanksgiving Day, I had not been feeling well for a couple of weeks, and I kept calling my mom. Mom, I think something's wrong. What's wrong? So I tell her what's going on. She's like, Amy, you're pregnant. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm a nurse. I would know.
I feel like you can't get pregnant quite yet.
Okay.
So we're going to back up the story because I feel like we missed actually where we met.
Okay.
Because you were not pregnant by that point. I was not pregnant by that point. And that actually is another interesting journey. I'm not sure where it kind of lands in here, but at some point, there is a new mission college.
Yes.
That is started.
Yes.
People can go to school and get degrees in religion, religious education, but we kind of all work our way through school colportering.
Right, exactly.
And they decide to have a branch campus. So it's called George King Institute. It's at the Review and Herald. And
right.
But they decide to have a branch campus at Atlantic Union College.
Yes. And they asked Greg to lead that, and I was assisting him. And I think we had 2 other teachers.
You did. Edith Mundake, who, I don't remember her her married name now.
I don't remember either. It's been so long.
That is her married name. It was it doesn't matter. Edith.
Right.
And then Mike Gill.
Mike Gill, I think.
Yeah, wow. We're going back into the recesses of our brain there.
And we had 6 students, and you were one of them.
I was one of them. That was when you and I officially kind of meet. I think we met at my sister's wedding because you guys decided, you all got found your husbands in the same program.
Right. Amy and her now husband were also colportering and
now, we've all kind of moved along into ministry, haven't we? But you start this mission. You start this branch mission. What possessed you? Because that's very different than colportering. And once again, now you're having to be the nurturer. You're this mother figure, although we're not too far apart in ages.
Younger than us. Yeah.
What did that time period teach you? The good and the bad, maybe.
Oh, wow. It taught me to depend more on God, and that God cares about the little things. We were living in a 5th-wheel camper. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't.
It was parked outside the union office, actually. They had hookups there. But we had heat, and our stove ran off of gas cylinder. And our gas would last about a week and a half, 10 days. And I remember there was one point, we were always busy. But there was one point where we were incredibly busy. And I remember praying and saying, God, we don't have time to fill up the gas cylinder. And that gas cylinder lasted for about 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And the day that we had time that we could take the gas cylinder, the gas ran out. And so I learned that not only will God answer my prayers for other people, but God will answer prayers for me about things that I may think are rather mundane or that I may think are not worthy of prayer. Since when does God care about gas? He doesn't, but he cares about me. And I believe that he answered that prayer because he wanted to show me how much he cares about me. So I learned dependence on God. It's a big thing.
I bring this up because we actually only were open for 6 months, or not even really 6 months. It was one semester. And then because of a number of things, it shut down. But you and Greg made a really important impact on my life at that point. And I can often see different things that led me to where I am. And that semester was actually a very important part of my journey. But it did take us through a little bit of, you start seeing politics happen.
And that was hard as a young person, I'll be honest, because I think we often look at our church and feel like everything's perfect. Everything's good.
Or we see everything being bad.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, everything was good. And I remember in high school, we had friends who lived in New Jersey, and they would often come to Washington, D.C. during Thanksgiving because everybody left the city, and so hotels were really cheap. Of course, all the Smithsonian museums are free, and so it became a really inexpensive but fun vacation. So we began joining them, and we came, I don't know, 6 or 7 years in a row for Thanksgiving. And I remember on one of those trips, we took a tour of the General Conference building, and I was just thinking, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is the headquarters of our church, you know, and this is where all the holy people work, you know, and in my naive mind, I was thinking, wow, like, these are the people that have really arrived. And I respected that. I looked up to that and thought, you know, wouldn't that be amazing to be somebody like that, to actually be able to work in the building? And now I drive up to the building every day and I'm like, wow, what a privilege I have to work here. But yes, you do start seeing politics. There's politics everywhere. Wherever there's people, there's politics.
It doesn't stop.
No. I mean, it can just be two people in an empty room and there's politics, you know.
Very true. Sometimes it could just be me in a room. But, you know, so after GKI, you guys do come down and you help somewhat. I think there's some kind of something that happens at the head, like at the general, not the General Conference, at George King Institute, at the Review and Herald.
Right.
Where do you go from there?
From there, we were working mostly helping the different academies in the conferences who were running colporteur programs during the school year. So during
did you
the
work
school
kind
year,
of for HHES?
Yes.
Which is Home Health Education Services.
Right, out of the Review and Herald.
Okay.
And for those listening and watching, the 6 of you were transferred down to...
Some of us did move.
I think a couple of you did move to a different, maybe to AUC.
I think one of us stayed at AUC, the other 5. Every time it kind of shifted because that school it went through some flux years. Yeah. Doesn't exist any longer, but each time a few more would come and go kind of a thing. So, but
everybody was transferred somewhere, and so it wasn't like you were just high and dry with nothing, right?
Actually, the transfer is how I met my husband, so I'm not really upset about that.
There's good and bad in everything, right? Yeah, so we continued working with the colporteur work, mostly with the students, but then we started doing more with what they called the big bookers, which were the big sets of books. Maybe some of our viewers would know
exactly Bible
story books.
I was going to say Bible study, and I knew the Bible study wasn't the right word. The blue
Arthur
Bible
Maxwell's
storybooks,
Bible story books, and Uncle Arthur's bedtime stories, and so we were working, doing some training for some of those, but I had never sold those sets. So it was a completely different system, different program, but that's what we would do. I did take nursing jobs in the fall, so we'd have a little more income. I was volunteer the whole time. I never got paid.
I actually never knew that.
Yeah, no, I never got paid. And I don't say that to brag, or to complain.
It's neither.
It is what it was. It was what it was. I was called. And it didn't matter to me. God was taking care of our needs. He took care of our gas. If he's going to take care of our gas, he's going to certainly take care of our food. You know, I wasn't worried about it. And I volunteered very happily. But during the school year, because we did 10-week summer programs, that was like the big intensive work time where we would have multiple programs all through Atlantic Union, Columbia Union, and, you know, a fun time, but busy, crazy time. And then the school year was more of a quieter time. So I would nurse during those periods. And Thanksgiving of 98, I was sick, wasn't sure what was going on, and ended up at the emergency room and found out I was pregnant.
Congratulations.
Yes. We didn't know at that point, but it was a boy. We know now.
Like
we knew 9 months later. Yeah. So that
and that is Tyler.
Tyler. Yes. That caused us to pause a little bit and think about, okay, we're having a baby. This is kind of life-changing. Kind of really very life-changing. And about that time, politics was happening. There were some changes being made in the colporteur program. And my husband was asked to take a position that would put us on the road even more than we already were. And we were already on the road 7 or 8 months out of the year. And we thought, we're having a baby. We could handle it maybe a year, maybe 2 years living on the road, but we can't raise a family doing that. And so we prayed about it and felt compelled for Greg to go to seminary. And Elder Ted Wilson was the president of the Review and Herald at that time. And so Greg went to him and said, we're not really sure what to do. This is where we're at. This is what's being offered. He knew the job position that was being offered him. He said, but I feel like this might be a good time to go to seminary. And Elder Wilson said, you know what? My father always told me you can never go wrong with education. So I would encourage you, if you feel like this would be the time to do it, do it. And so he released us and we went to seminary from there. Greg went to seminary. I went along with.
And raised Tyler.
Yeah.
So you're up at Andrews. I'm guessing that's the seminary because that's right. Our seminary that we generally go to. So he was at Andrews. And what are you doing? How long is he in the seminary? 2 years?
About 2.5.
2.5 years. So what do you do during those 2.5 years?
During that time, I took a job as a nurse. And I found a job that I didn't expect to love as much as I did. And that was being a hospice nurse. I was looking for positions. I was looking for something that would give me some flexibility. And it was one that happened to work. They hired me to work on weekends and holidays as a triage nurse, which meant that with a hospice, we're caring for people who are terminally ill and walking them through the process, the dying process, and then supporting the family through it. And the triage nurse, because it's hospice, there's a 24-hour call line. And the nurses would work an 8-hour shift during the day, but then they needed somebody to answer phones at night and on weekends and holidays when the office was closed. And so that's what they hired me to do. But I wasn't sure about accepting it, but I still accepted it because of working on Sabbath. It required Friday night and Sabbath hours because it was weekends and holidays. And we had a friend in seminary, his wife was also a nurse, and we were all talking about this. And I remember him saying, Ellen White says that we should not take a job on Sabbath hours for pecuniary reasons. And I'm like, what in the world is pecuniary? How do you spell pecuniary? How do I even look this up?
Can't even get it into the dictionary.
So we looked it up, and pecuniary means for purposes of earning money. And I just felt really convicted. I had taken this job specifically nights or weekends and holidays because Greg would be able to take care of the baby. And we did it for pecuniary reasons. And I just felt convicted that was wrong. So I was, 2 weeks into my orientation. And I decided I have to quit this job because of that. I was in the wrong. I need to quit the job. So I went into my supervisor. I said, I need to talk to you. She said, good. I need to talk to you too, but I'm busy today. Can we talk tomorrow? I thought, okay. Oh, and she said, I need to talk to you, and it's more urgent than what you need to talk to me about. And I thought, well, what's more urgent than I need to quit? Are you firing me? So the next day I went into her office and she said, we've made some changes. She said, would you be open to working nights and every other weekend and holidays? And I said, well, okay, I think so. Yes, that would be great. Because now all of a sudden it wasn't, the majority of my time would be nights. I talked to Greg about it. I didn't say yes immediately. I told her I'd think about it, talked to my husband, and we decided that I would take that position, that offer, and whatever hours I worked on Sabbath, we'd just donate that to a charity or to offering or something. So we felt that was okay.
Because the work still needs to be done.
Exactly.
So even though you're needing to earn the money, for you at the same time, that someone needs to be there.
Exactly.
To be able to help these families who are on hospice. So it's not like a work that doesn't need to be done.
It's a work that can't not be done. You can't tell people you can't die on Sabbath, I'm sorry, because there's nobody there. But we felt that the right way to handle it would be for us just to donate that money. So it was a volunteer position on the weekends, essentially, or on Sabbath hours, ministry. And I actually found that working for hospice was a ministry. It wasn't just nursing. I was being a pastor and a chaplain to those patients and families because they were going through so much. And I don't know about you, but things are bigger, badder, worser, harder, scarier in the middle of the night.
You definitely nailed me.
Right?
Absolutely would agree.
And so I would get calls in the middle of the night that nobody would ever get during the day, just because people are just terrified, because things are just, I don't know what it is about nighttime. Maybe it's the darkness. Maybe it's knowing that people aren't available. I don't know what it is. But people would call in absolute terror and fear. And to be able to minister to them on the phone or in person, I had the opportunity to go to some homes and actually make an in-person visit. But to be able to talk to them and just calm them down, help them to understand what's going on with their loved one. Usually there was some kind of a health crisis that triggered it. They couldn't breathe, or they're not able to eat, they're vomiting or whatever. And so being able to help them understand what the process is that's happening physically, what they need to do to fix it, and then how are you doing? You're taking care of your mom. This has got to be really hard. What's going on in your mind right now? And just to listen to them. I'm not a counselor. I didn't really have, we were in an area where people were very Christian. And so I was able to ask or to look at the chart to see if they were Christian. And then I'd offer to pray if they were Christian. And I don't remember once that somebody denied prayer.
You're with people in their most vulnerable moments.
Yeah.
My husband's mother was on hospice, and we were out there, and that nurse really kind of journeyed through those last days with us. And his mom, I mean, they say she could hear things, but she was non-responsive. But she helped her have dignity to the end, but she helped us navigate that. She made sure that we took care of her, but that we were taking care of ourselves too. And it's very
holistic, really.
It really is. It's a very precious role to play during those last days, weeks, months, hours, whatever it may be. And it's interesting. I find that I call these kind of years, like, in a way, they're like the Midian years. Like, there's this big picture that we can't always see. You working as a call porter, you helping start this, school, you doing all these things create this beautiful set of skills that God continues to plan to use. But sometimes you don't always understand how these puzzle pieces are fitting together.
You don't.
So after you get done at the seminary, where do you guys move from there?
During seminary, even before seminary, Greg and I started having discussions. Okay, so you're going to be pastor. What am I going to do? Because I knew I wanted to do ministry. I knew I didn't want to preach every week. I knew that I didn't really necessarily need to be up front every week, but I needed to be involved in ministry. And in my mind, simple as it is, a pastor's wife plays the piano, organizes potluck, and types the bulletin. And I was like, that's not ministry. Really.
For you, it wouldn't be.
For me, it wasn't.
Yeah. You wanted a bigger,
right.
You felt a deeper purpose.
I felt a deeper call, but I didn't know what that looked like. And how do you be involved in ministry? Because we also enjoyed working together. All those years, call portering together, canvassing, same thing. All those years working together, we worked really, really well. We synergized well together. And so the thought of me being stuck in the hospital nursing, or hospice, or wherever nursing, and he's doing ministry, like that didn't really fit who we were.
It wasn't what God was calling you to.
Exactly. And so we started praying, what was my role going to be? What was I going to do? Yes, he's the pastor, but what can my role be? And how do we do that? Do I volunteer? Do I work nursing part-time and volunteer the other half? Because we were sponsored by New York Conference, which meant that they were paying the bill. And in turn, we would return to New York Conference to pastor. It's not a rich conference. They couldn't hire 2 pastors for the church. They probably couldn't even hire the pastor and a Bible worker, or, a part-time worker. So financially, how would we make it work was a big question. And just praying about it, really didn't have any direction. But then Greg took a class, and part of the class assignment was to break into small groups and pray for each other for the entire semester. And his group decided to carry on for a second semester praying for each other. And in one of those prayer meetings, he asked for prayer for this particular request. What's Amy's role going to be? How are we going to make this work? And they prayed. He left that prayer meeting, went to his school mailbox, and there was the first edition of some mission magazine. I don't remember what magazine it was, but he pulled it out, and the thought struck him, Amy has always wanted to be a missionary. And we had decided when we were married that, when we die and are buried, on our gravestone is going to be, they were soul winners. Like that's our thing. We're soul winning. And he thought, we can do soul winning here, or we can do soul winning on the Amazon in Africa, And so he started exploring options for mission. I remember he came home so excited. I think we need to go as missionaries. And you have to understand that Greg adopts ideas and then rules them out. So he's 100%, we're going to be missionaries, but I know that he's going to start thinking in his mind why we can't be missionaries, and in the end we won't be. And so I refused to get excited, which frustrated him because he thought I should be excited.
Because you really want to do this.
Exactly.
You really want to be on that Amazon River in Africa.
Exactly.
But you're like, I can't get too excited until I know he's really committed.
Right. Exactly.
That's actually very much me. I can't get myself excited until I get on an airplane. I don't know what's going to happen. So
right.
I get that.
Yeah. So we started praying about it. He started exploring options. The best option for us was to go with Adventist Frontier Missions, which does church planting on front lines. So reaching unreached people groups. And we explored the calls that they had and didn't feel called to any of them. And so we created our own call to the country of Laos. And
how do you exactly go about creating your own call?
So we talked to the director of Adventist Frontier Missions and said, none of these really fit. They don't feel right. There's something not right about it. Could we do some research and propose a new project in a new country? And he said, sure. So Greg took an elective for his MDiv, which was a self-guided course, self-study, something where he did all this research. And he literally went to the SDA yearbook, which is all of the statistics each year put out by the church, right? All the countries and how many Adventists. And he went through it looking for the least reached country, the country with the fewest number of pastors, fewest number of members. And he came to Laos. We had no idea where Laos was. Mind you, we're scuba divers. We both took scuba diving in college, and we're scuba divers. And we're like, oh, it's an island in the Pacific. We're definitely called. This is the place, right? God has a sense of humor. Laos is the only landlocked country in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Only landlocked.
The only landlocked country in Southeast Asia. But we developed a call to go there. AFM accepted it. And we went to do church planting, but we were rather naive in spite of all the research. There wasn't a lot of information available about the country. We knew that it was communist, and so we'd have to be careful and be creative how we do the church planting, but we got there, and we were asked to help to strengthen the church that was there, and it really needed it. There was no ordained pastors in the country at that time. The church was struggling, politics. And so we stayed in the capital instead of going out into the province. We stayed in the capital, and we ended up opening a school, believe it or not.
Wait, you mean so those skills that God had kind of given you guys were being able to be put to use?
So we opened up, instead of GKI, it was GEI, Gold English Institute. That confused me for the longest time. Is it GKI or GEI? GEI, Gold English Institute.
I remember when I found out you guys were going as missionaries. because I had always wanted to be a missionary. I actually wanted to be a missionary to Nepal, and I actually didn't know where Nepal was. Just
good for you.
To clarify, never been a missionary to Nepal, but I remember just being so excited for you guys to be able to go, and you were the first people I knew in my at that time in my life who were actually missionaries. And it was a very neat experience. And I remember I got AFM magazine so I could follow along with your family's journeys, because every like quarter or something, we'd get to read a story from Greg and Amy. And so you start GEI,
Gold English Institute. And we launched in 2002. We had our second son. We waited for him to be born, Ryan. And then shortly after he was born, we left. He was born in March, and we were going to leave in May. But then we were encouraged that Greg should get a TESOL certificate, so teaching English as a second language.
Okay.
Or TEFL, foreign language. One of the two. He should get training so that he could teach English. So we went back to Andrews, spent 6 or 8 weeks there, and launched from there in July.
You launched to where?
To Laos.
Okay, so
we went to Thailand first because we didn't have a visa for Laos yet. We needed to have a business visa. You can't get a missionary visa. So we went to Thailand, stayed with some other AFM missionaries there. The husband had worked in Laos before and knew the language fluently. So he traveled with Greg into Laos. They found a job, found a house, talked to the church, met leadership, met the pastor there, and so then Greg came back to Thailand. When he came back, he started feeling sick, and we thought, it's just what do they call it, Montezuma's revenge. It's just from traveling and ate the wrong thing. But a couple days later, he collapsed on the bathroom floor and couldn't get up. And we realized something was really wrong. His calves he said they were cramping up, and asked me to massage his legs, but the muscle was soft. So we didn't know what was going on. And so we thought, time to go to the doctor. And so it was 2:00 in the morning, of course, dark Nighttime. And scary. So, our host, the AFM missionary, drove us to the hospital. And I remember him asking, do you want the best hospital or the closest hospital? And Greg said, I think we need the closest one. And that scared me because Greg's tough. I didn't expect him to say that. So we got him to the hospital, and they couldn't find a blood pressure. Even though he was sitting upright, he was able to talk, which is unusual. If you don't have a blood pressure, then you should be at
not
least
sitting up and
very
talking.
Confused. Anyway, they kept running tests. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And they finally, after a couple of days, determined that he had amoebic dysentery and dengue fever. And of course, now I forgot the last one.
It feels like illnesses that we read about in our mission storybooks.
Exactly. And they're all at one time. And they all kind of worked against each other. So one could cause internal bleeding. The other one decreased your platelets, so you'd bleed more. It was just everything working together in the wrong way. And he ended up in ICU for several days. And I remember taking his clothes home and opening the bag to wash them. And it was the same smell that I smelled in my hospice patients' homes because his organs were shutting down. And I remember the doctor talking to me and saying, he needs blood. The blood bank doesn't have his blood type. You need to talk to all of your friends and find blood. I knew 2 people in the country. And I was scared, but I was called. And I don't remember saying it, but the missionary's wife, who we were staying with, keeps telling me, she reminds me every time we see her. She said, Amy, I will never forget you came into the kitchen one day and said, I don't know what's going to happen to Greg. He might not make it. If he doesn't, I will go home, raise my kids, but I will come back because I'm called. God got us through that. Greg recovered miraculously. He has no long-term deficits. He should, but he doesn't. And just starting off our mission career like that was incredibly difficult, but at the same time, it was incredibly affirming that we were where God wanted us to be. And that even though we were on the other side of the world, far from everything that we knew, everything that was familiar, Alyssa, I remember walking into a public restroom and it was a glorified hole in the ground, right? It's this little porcelain thing on the ground with ridges where you put your feet. It's called a squat toilet. I had never seen one in my life. And I remember coming out and telling Greg, I don't even know how to use the restroom right. I don't even know how to perform basic bodily functions appropriately. Like, that's how little we felt. But recognizing that we were where God wanted us to be and that he knew where we were and that he was with us was just, it got us through a lot.
So you served a number of years with AFM. And during this time, you're raising two boys. What was it like to be a mother raising your sons in the mission field?
You want the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
I want you to share what you feel comfortable sharing, but being vulnerable enough to maybe tell the bad and the ugly.
So on the good side, it was wonderful because our kids were involved in mission. It was wonderful because they got to travel the world. It was wonderful because they got to learn another language and another culture. And they think differently than their peers who grew up here in America. The downside for me was that I was called to be a missionary, but I was a stay-at-home mom because Greg was spending more than full time opening up this crazy school. And we knew that we were supposed to open the school, but it became a challenge for me because I felt I'm supposed to be a missionary, but I can't be a missionary. I'm supposed to learn the language, but I don't have the time to learn the language because I'm changing diapers, I'm making meals, I'm putting kids down for naps. Of course, they don't nap at the same time, and
they never do.
No. And I just felt so limited. I don't think I ever got to the point where I resented my children. God cut me from that, but it was difficult. And I remember praying about it and saying, God, but I'm supposed to do something big for you. And I remember him distinctly saying to me, and of course, his voice sounds oddly like mine in my head, right? It wasn't an audible voice or, cloud writing in the sky. He said, what if I want you to do something little? And I remember arguing back saying, no. I think you're confused. You called me to do something big. And he said, no, you're the one that's confused. What if I call you to do something little? Would you be okay with that? And it took me some time, and I finally accepted, yes, I'll just do what you put in front of me right now. And maybe in the future there'll be something big, or maybe when I look back, it will all add up to something big, whatever big is. But yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. And I remember during my time of coming to grips with this whole thing and feeling, am I really making a difference at all? There was a gentleman who had a strained relationship with the church. At one point he was an elder, and then he left the church, and then he came back, and he was a deacon, and then he was an elder, and then he left the church, and it was just over politics. You can't get away from it,
seems
right?
Like an interwoven thread
common
here.
Theme. So we were asked by the union to please disciple him. He's an important person. Disciple him. And so we did. And he was actually one of the village chiefs in our little community. And he lost his job when he became a Christian. So he was just doing odd jobs here and there. His wife was an amazing seamstress. You could just write down your measurements, send her a little drawing of what you would like, and she'll make it, and it will fit you like nothing has ever fit you. She's just incredible. And so that's how they made their money, was mostly through her business, sewing clothing. But we started discipling him. We hired him to be our gardener, even though we didn't really need one, just to give him a little something because we knew that we wanted to hire him for the school. And so he would come over every day. He lived in our yard, basically. He would come early in the morning, sweep all the leaves, whatever, water the plants, and then he'd be waiting for the boys so the boys could go out and play with him. And I remember him at this point where I'm really struggling. I remember him coming to me one day and saying, you know, Amy, our family has started reading the Bible, singing a song, and praying before we eat, just like you. And I thought, just like us. And two things struck me. One, we don't do that. I don't know what he's watching. But two, he's watching us. People are watching how I'm living. People are watching how I'm raising my kids. People are watching how I'm responding to stress in my life. People are watching how I relate to my husband. People are watching. And I thought, wow, maybe I'm being a missionary. Maybe being a stay-at-home mom is what I need to do right now. Maybe that's the witness that my friends and neighbors need. We since realized that in the morning we would have a devotional and pray before we eat breakfast.
Got it.
Then in the evening, we'd read a story, sing some songs, pray, and then the boys would go to bed. And somehow he interpreted that was mealtime, right? But a number of experiences like that where I just realized that just living a faithful Christian life is sometimes enough. And that life comes in phases. That because you can't do something now doesn't mean that you won't have the opportunity in the future. God might bring you back around to something.
So how many years did you work with AFM?
10 years. Well, 9 years and 11 months. Okay. But we call it 10.
We'll go with 10. We
10
can round
years.
up. At the end of your time, now, did you always work in Laos?
Yes.
With them? Okay. Yeah. So then at the end of this rounded up to 10 years time period, where did you go from there? What were you called? What were you and your family called to do? Because this is your story, so I don't want it to be Greg's story because he will be interviewed here. So I want to make sure that we're hearing how this impacts you, because that's the important.
Sure. So Greg got an email from the General Conference saying we need somebody who can direct what was then called the Buddhist Study Center. It was part of Global Mission, and it was one of 6 centers that had been set up to study and find best practices for discipling and church planting among some of the hard to reach world religions and peoples. So we have Hindus, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists. Then you have urban and post-Christian secular, right? So they needed somebody to fill the Buddhist position. Would Greg consider? Long story short, he was hired to that position, appointed to that position. And we asked if we could stay in Laos, but they said, well, because of the politics in the country, because of travel challenges, it would be best if you were in Thailand. So we moved to Thailand. In Thailand, they had already purchased a home for the previous director. And it was about an hour and a half or so north of Bangkok. Beautiful home. It was a teak Thai house with the arching roof line, and it was gorgeous house, but it was in the middle of nowhere. When we moved, I felt extremely isolated. We lived on a pond. The community was around a pond, but everybody was there because they wanted peace and quiet, not because they wanted to be in a noisy community. And so I don't remember ever meeting any of the neighbors because they always kept their gates locked and shut. There's no way to get to them. And we had one car, which Greg took to the office every day. And bless his heart, he's a workaholic. So, it's like from the time he's awake to the time he's about ready to drop at night, he's at the office. And there was a busy road. So I didn't feel comfortable walking, could not bike to the market.
How old are the boys at this point?
The boys would have been 10, 12.
So they're kind of stuck in this.
Right. I was homeschooling. We had homeschooled in Laos. We had homeschooled because there's no Adventist school, no Christian education. And the local education we didn't feel would prepare them for high school here.
In America.
Right. And it had been our goal that once the boys were finished with elementary school, then would consider moving back sometime during high school. So we knew they needed to have a good, strong education. So we homeschooled. But we had a student missionary who would do the actual education. I'd prepare the curriculum, but she would do the teaching. But now we're in Thailand, no student missionary, and it's just the boys and I at home all day long. No car, no way to get out, no friends, no community, no witness who's watching. And I really, really, really struggled because in Laos, I had developed a medical ministry where I was doctoring. I was doing things I shouldn't. I was diagnosing and prescribing and treating. Like nurses don't do that, but that's what was needed and that's what God gifted me to do. I was discipling people. I was involved in the church. I was playing the piano actually for weddings. And I mean, you know, I had purpose. I had a role. People in our community knew us, not just in the church, but the general greater community. So I felt like I had a role. I had something to do. But then I go to Thailand and what am I doing? I'm just a stay-at-home mom, kind of a reluctant stay-at-home mom. And it was hard. I don't remember. I know we had culture shock in Laos, but I had a bigger culture shock moving across the border because of the isolation. After a year, we had a girl in Laos that we fostered. She would live with us off and on. And
what is her name?
Sita.
Sita?
Sita.
Okay.
We decided to have her come live with us in Thailand. But she needed a visa. The only visa that made sense was to get an education visa, which meant that she couldn't homeschool. She'd have to be enrolled in a school. So we started looking at options for Adventist school. And what made most sense at that time was to move to Bangkok. So there was a local church plant in the area where we were living. We handed that church plant. It was ready to be handed over to the mission there. Handed that over, moved to Bangkok, enrolled all 3 kids into the elementary school. And then all of a sudden I'm free. What do I do? But Greg was traveling a lot with this new position. And so I was, again, stay-at-home mom, helping Sita because she didn't speak English. And we put her in an English medium school. So I remember being up until 2:00 in the morning with her, working on homework, helping her to understand not just the English, but understand the concept that was being taught. And it was just, it was difficult. That was another hard transition. But eventually I started working with Greg once she kind of got settled in school, started working with him and more of the office end of things, but also helping him think through presentations about how do you disciple somebody from a Buddhist background? How do you make the gospel relevant and compelling to somebody with a Buddhist worldview? And how do we teach people that? How do we share that knowledge with church planters?
It's different than trying to reach an American or an Australian or some from Zimbabwe. It's a different way that they would look at God.
Yep.
There are different things that they would connect with it and shame or whatever. Exactly. All these different kind of things are different than how we would normally train our pastors to do it.
Right. And so that's what we were wrestling with together. How do we do that? And at some point, we were working for the General Conference. As a General Conference missionary, there's usually always a certain percentage of a budget for the spouse. So you're guaranteed some kind of work, but there wasn't any position available. So Greg's supervisor at that time just said, well, work with Greg. Okay, I'll work with Greg. So I was essentially getting like a secretary salary to work with him. But then I was able to travel, and I don't remember thinking about it now, how that worked. I was able to start traveling with him a little bit. And there was apparently some discussion that happened that we were unaware of, because I got an email out of the blue saying, by the way, you were recently appointed associate director of the Global Mission Center for East Asian Religions. It's a big handful, mouthful. So I was made, instead of being a secretary, I was appointed as the associate director, which meant that now I had a travel budget. So somebody said something at some point, how come the secretary is traveling? A secretary doesn't have a travel budget. But anyway, nothing that
or maybe they saw your value.
Possibly.
Let's go with that.
Possibly.
At this point, real quick, at some point you start sending your kids away.
Yeah.
I believe they went to Great Lakes Adventist Academy. Was one
in
of the ones.
In a roundabout sort of way. Yeah.
Even though you really wanted, you had these mixed feelings. What was it like to lose your children?
Oh my goodness. I've only seen Greg cry twice. And once was when he dropped Tyler off at Academy and drove away. Knowing what a challenge it was for me to adjust to high school, I kind of projected that on him. That it could be a struggle for him, and how important it was for me to be able to call my mom and dad 2 hours away, and knowing we're 2 days away, 12 hours difference. It was hard. It was really hard. But again, God had made it clear this was where he needed to go. We included both of the boys in the decision. So it wasn't something we did to them. It was something that we did together. It was a decision that we made. And you know what? It was a good thing. Tyler had a wonderful experience. Some incredible stories of things that he did. He listens to his grandfather and great uncle's stories of what they did in Academy, and I think strove to beat those stories.
To one up them.
Exactly. But no, he had a good experience. Did he miss home? Yes. Did he wish that we were closer? Yes. But talking to both of the boys now about it, I even just talked to Ryan at Christmas and we were talking about, what it was like. And he said, I don't regret it at all. I don't regret leaving home. He said, yeah, it was hard. But he said, I think it was good. It was okay. We were fine. We are fine. We've grown from it. It's all good. And I realized, our kids only know what they know. They don't have a shared experience like I did in my childhood to compare it to. They just know what life was for them. And praise God, both of them have said it was good. We enjoyed it.
So, at some point, you've been promoted from secretary to associate director.
A little bit of a jump there.
At some point, the GC has you come back. Or
we asked to come back.
Okay.
When we took the position, we said, look, we know that we need to come back. We want to be back to help our children adjust. We've heard all kinds of stories. We know that it's important that the family transition back together. So the time came for us to transition with Tyler, and we were told, oh, no, you can't. No, because we had understood that we would be allowed to transition back with him, but stay in the position. Apparently that wasn't what was communicated. We misunderstood. And so we sent Tyler back, then we sent Ryan back. And Ryan in particular had a difficult time adjusting for whatever reason. Tyler was doing okay, but we just felt we need to go back. We need to come back to the States to help the boys adjust. It's not right for us to send them by themselves and to deal with all of this change, because they were 5 months and 1 year old when we went. And not 1 year, 2 years. They're Asian. Some Asians who grew up in America tell you I'm like a banana, yellow on the outside, but if you cut me open, I'm white, right? Our boys are the opposite. They're white on the outside, but they're more Asian in the way that they think. They're more Asian in the way that they process things. At least they were when they came. They've adjusted quite a bit now. But coming back we knew was going to be difficult for them. And so when it was clear that Ryan in particular was struggling, we talked to our supervisor and said, we're coming back. This is our notice. We're coming back. And he said, we don't have anybody ready to replace you. What if we let you move back and keep your position, but work from the States?
We can do that.
Right. Exactly. We'd be happy to do that. Thank you. if that's what's best for the center. And they said, absolutely, it's better to have you guys working from the States from a distance rather than not having a director. So we moved back in 2018.
Yep.
And
actually, your first day walking into office, you were another answer to my prayer.
Isn't it amazing how God does that?
It's interesting how like you guys laid a really good foundation for me for wanting to serve the church, even if it was just for one semester. And I followed your journey very closely through the years, and you guys left a very lasting impression on me because I had always wanted to be a missionary. I had always wanted to serve. I didn't know all the struggles that you were going through, but many of those same struggles of like, God, I want to have a purpose. Yeah. I feel called. And I was doing the same thing. I was being a mother.
Yeah.
And the day that you walked in, I had come to start signing papers to potentially move here. And
I remember seeing you in the parking lot.
And I saw you in the parking lot, and I had prayed that morning when I was at the hotel, feeling completely out of my depth. I said, God, just send me a sign that it will all be okay. And here I see walking two people who have had a tremendous impact on me in my life. And I spent some time with you because I had to wait an hour to see HR. Right. And we talked and we shared and we realized that our kids were going to go to the same academy. And it was this beautiful thing, realizing that God was already taking care of it. He was already putting me with these people who I admired so greatly. But you came here 2018, you served, you continued to serve in this role for quite a while, but just recently, and you and I have prayed about this. Yeah. Just recently, you were asked to be one of the associate directors for the Institute of World Mission.
Yes.
So in our final minutes, because we're kind of wrapping up here, what do you get to do now? And how has this journey from a girl who wanted to serve on the Amazon River in Africa, but who God led to come out of her shell through colporteuring, to set up schools, to feel the isolation of being a missionary spouse, to raising children? What has God now called you to do, and how has all of this journey worked together to serve?
Working with the Center for East Asian Religions, our focus was working to train global mission pioneers and local indigenous workers. We did some training of some missionaries, but it was mostly local people. So now my role is shifting from training locals to training the GC missionaries. So the Institute of World Mission offers 3-week training classes for anybody who is coming to America from another country, going from one country or one division to another division. So interdivision, inter-service employees, they call them, or international service employees. So the training helps understand cultural differences, how to deal with cultural conflict, how to deal with transition with your children, how to navigate the world of education for your children, how to thrive as a family in a mission field. You know, I always thought that being in the mission field would be like a spiritual mountaintop experience, right? And somebody told us before we went, and I thought they were just ridiculous for saying it, that the mission field is a spiritual vacuum. And we found that that's true. Being in the mission field can very much be a spiritual vacuum, especially when you're working on the front lines, because you don't have the organized worship services necessarily. The worship services usually are not in your heart language, which makes a huge difference in how you can worship. The music may be different. The way you sit and stand, the whole thing may be very different. A lot of times, in our case, the needs of the local members, they needed milk. We were already past Swiss steak, right?
Swiss steak. That's a great Worthington reference there.
Right. So, you know, we weren't being fed spiritually, and we had to learn how to self-feed. And that's really hard sometimes. So So it wasn't a spiritual mountaintop experience all the time. Did we have those experiences? Yes. And I'm thankful for those. We could write books like Eric B. Hare, but I would say the majority of our experience was not that. And so to have experienced that and to be able to help prepare families, especially, to be ready for this, I feel like it's very much like my hospice experience. I know what lies ahead, and I know how to help them through that, right? I know some of what they're going to experience. I don't know everything, obviously, but I know the emotional journey that it is. I know what it's like to raise your kids in the mission field. I know what it's like to be sick in the mission field. I know what it's like to be overworked in the mission field. I know what it's like to have spiritual mountaintops and spiritual valleys in the mission field. I know how to send our kids. I know how to transition. It's like I've had this broad experience that I feel God is now bringing together and saying, okay, in my mind, it looks like a Christmas wreath. You have all these little sprigs of different types of pine and different berries or whatever that you have that they look like a mess when they're on the table, but when it comes together, it makes sense. And I kind of feel like that's where I'm at right now. I'm still learning, still very new.
But you've only been doing this for a few months.
Right. A few weeks, because of the holidays and all that.
I was going to go with a few months.
But yeah, it's just been a short time. So I'm still adjusting. I'm still transitioning, another transition. But just to have this opportunity to use my experience. Maybe I will do a big thing. I don't know. But I'm okay with doing the small thing and allowing God to use all of these small things to bless other people and to make their experience better.
Yeah, I want to say what a gift it is to our church for all these missionaries who are getting ready to be sent out, to have you be able to help them. I know it's a team. It's not just you.
Right.
But for someone who has devoted their life to wanting to serve, who has gone through the struggle of knowing that maybe my husband won't survive, the struggle of trying to figure out what is my purpose, having your children leave, all of these different things that you can now walk and help journey through this with some of them and train them from a very personal place.
And if I could just jump in.
I'll let you.
I think what I have learned through all of this is not to be afraid of the hard times, not to be afraid of the dark times in life. Because if we allow God to use those to transform us, then it's like we turn the whole situation on its head, right? All these dark times God allows, but they come from Satan, and he's intending them for evil. He's intending them for destruction, to destroy us, to discourage us, to pull us away from God. But if we take that and just say, God, I can't feel you. God, I can't see you. God, I can't hear you, but I'm going to trust that you're there. Help me get through this. When we get through, it becomes a strength, and we can use that to bless other people. Because the thing about the gospel, Alyssa, is that the gospel is healing. And if I have not been broken, and if I haven't been hurt, and if I haven't experienced pain in my life and allowed God through the gospel or God to transform me in that, I can't relate to other people. Because other people are hurting, other people are broken, other people are in pain. And if I can say, you know what, I've experienced something similar. It doesn't have to be the same, but this is what God did for me, and I'm going to have faith that God's going to help you. I've seen so many people transformed because of that, because I can share from my experience. So I feel like all of these berries and the pretty things on the reef of my life were all the hardships, and me just allowing God, learning. It's a process, but learning to allow God to work even in those times turns them into the pretty decorations that just make a life beautiful, I think.
I love that. I think that we want to picture the Christian walk as this very beautiful. It's kind of like how you said about the church, so you had this everything was perfect, rosy view.
Right.
And we kind of want to see that the Christian walk is that way. It's not.
It isn't.
But it's about learning how to find joy through the journey, through the valleys.
Exactly.
I think one thing I really want to take away from our talk too is the what if he's called me to do something small? Yeah. In each stage of your life, you have been a missionary, whether it was as a colporteur, as a hospice nurse on a phone, as a mother, to serving where you were traveling and speaking and training missionaries. All of these have been mission. And I want to encourage those who are listening to realize that God has called all of us.
Yes.
And maybe like me, you had always wanted to go and be a missionary. I knew from the age like 10 or 12, I wanted to go to Nepal. Never been to Nepal, never even set foot in Asia. But God called me, but I had to be willing to wait and find what that call was.
Yes.
And for many years, it was being faithful to being a mother. For many years, it was being the Pathfinder director or the youth leader or whatever it may be. But at the same time, I want to encourage people that if God has called you to the Amazon rivers of the world, like Greg, I want to encourage you to go find them.
Yeah.
Because the world needs missionaries.
Absolutely.
We need them here in our home countries. We need them in our neighborhoods and our communities, but we need them around the world too.
Absolutely.
And if God is laying that on your heart, to pursue it. Or he may take that burden away and give it to someone else. Not because he doesn't want to use you.
Yeah. We talked to somebody, actually the person who had hired Greg from New York conference when we were at seminary. And when we felt that God was leading us into mission, we realized we've got to let the conference know. So the conference president actually came out for a visit and took us out to eat. And the whole meal he's talking about, wow, it's going to be so great having you back in the conference. And this is where we're thinking of putting you. And this is our dream, and just creating this whole big picture, right? And Greg and I are just looking at each other like, this isn't going the way that it should. How do we break the news? And finally, at the very end, Greg said, well, we have something we need to tell you. We feel called to mission work. And the president, his wife was there. They sat very quietly. They looked at each other's and their eyes teared up. And they said, we felt called, but we never went. And we've always wondered. They said, God has clearly worked in our ministry, and he has. But we've always wondered, what would life be like if we had followed that call? If you're feeling called, you need to go. So yes.
I think I even know who that president might have been.
I think you do. So if God is calling you, if you feel a burden for mission work, even if you don't know how to get there or what to do, just follow God's leading. Step by step, he'll take you. I didn't know how to go to missions. I didn't know that there wasn't a degree in college called missionary. Like there isn't.
There still isn't.
No, there still isn't.
Although you can get a doctorate of missiology.
Yes, you can.
So I mean,
but it doesn't train you
to be a missionary.
To be a missionary, right? So yeah, I went into it very naively, but knowing that I was called and just letting God lead, and God did.
And actually, that's kind of what Institute of World Mission does. Is it is kind of a training ground. It teaches cross-cultural understanding and just really helps as much as you can within 3 weeks.
Right.
To prepare you for it.
Yep. And to
but
start
we don't
shifting
leave you
attitudes.
alone either.
Right.
Which is a beautiful thing with the church. It's not like, okay, go be a missionary. But thank you so much, Amy. Your story was beautiful, and I learned a lot of new things. I just want to let you know what a privilege it is to serve with you.
Thank you.
Here in the general conference building. I still do walk in and feel kind of humbled. I do realize that the people here are not perfect because I am here.
And I am too.
So just saying, we have demystified that.
Right.
The general conference is not perfect.
We're
people
real
because we are here.
We're real people.
But thank you for how you continue to serve in the little ways and the big ways, and
God.
continue to fulfill his call.
Praise God.
For those of you who are tuning in, we encourage you to subscribe so that when the next A&N Profiles comes out, you will be able to join us and hear how God has moved through the lives of other members of the General Conference Leadership Council. And we want to thank you for spending this time with us, for hearing Amy's story. And if God has inspired you or is convicting you, we encourage you to listen to the Spirit and reach out to us or reach out to your local church pastor and find out how you can move forward on whatever it is that God is calling you to do. Thank you for joining us once again today for A&N Profiles.